Hey, everybody, welcome back to Lawyer Forward Live. We are going to be working on having these sessions every Friday live in the Lawyer Forward Facebook group. If you're listening to this in the future on the podcast app of your choice, you cannot do what I'm about to describe. If you are watching live, you can ask questions and we can interact with our guests, including Jordan Ostroff, who is with me today. Jordan, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, Mike. Thanks for having me. And for those of you listening in the future on a podcast, you're more than welcome to ask questions. We just won't be able to answer
The
them because it's
machine
not
doesn't
that.
know. Yeah, we can hook up a GPT, TP3, whatever it is called, and we'll get you some automated answers, but you won't get Jordan. And so, why are you even doing this? Jordan, we are talking about something that, man, I could rant about this all day. It seems esoteric to too many people. It could be fundamental to what it means to be a lawyer. To me, those are like the two extremes. Either this is a nothing burger that all the modern bros want to complain about and get their clicks from. But to me, I'm like, this may be the most important conversation we ever have. What we're talking about today is personal branding. And as we dig into it, again, all of you at home can ask questions if you're here of Jordan, but I want to sort of frame out this conversation by asking, who cares, right? Who cares about this thing? There's all this stuff on the internet about becoming a creator and the creator economy and making all this stuff and being an influencer. My kids make fun of me. They use the term influencer for me in a very derogatory way, and I do not like it. Who cares about any of this crap? We got contracts to write. Jordan, who cares?
So initially, your clients care because they want to. I don't know that they necessarily want to get to know you, but they want to know enough about you to know that you're the exact right fit. And then secondarily to that, your referral sources care about it because they want to know who you're the right fit for and how long-term committed you are to this. And then tertiary to that, I think your family wants to know because this is the thing that should free you up to live more of a life instead of being chained to a desk for 80, 100, 120 hours a week.
All right, so at minimum, we can say there's a money justification. This is how you lead with lawyers. You gotta. We're all so strapped. We've seen the data about how hard it is for us to get billable work done. Everybody's so time wound. So with lawyer, as with any business owners, you got to explain to us how it makes us more money, how it makes it so we can collect more money, or how it makes it so we don't get sued. Right? These are sort of the core motivation. So we'll start with at least you can make some more money. So let's say that is real. What we want to do then is define to me what is the minimum version. What is the version of this activity, since we know we're time strapped? What's the version of this activity where the leverage is the highest, where you can figure out your personal brand? So let's step back for a second and let's define personal brand. You and I might have to, it's such a vague, tell me what you mean by personal brand when you say we should be building this thing.
So I don't even know that this is necessarily a definition, but this is the way that I always imagine it. What do other people think of when they think of you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and behind that assumption is that people are thinking of you, right? Uh, that they're having a conversation about you at all. But part of the driving force of this is that you're trying to create that momentum so that people will talk about you when you're not in the room. And when they do, it's not about you, broke some ethical rule and stole money from a client or something positive. So let's figure out what the minimum possible is. So for you, when you're advising lawyers to kind of get started with this, to start to the phrase that I use all the time is to be yourself loudly. When you tell lawyers to start with this activity, where do you start? If I'm a lawyer and I'm used to being in a basement and plugging out contracts, and Jordan tells me, hey, I need to be more public, I need to be myself loudly, where do you start? What's the minimum viable, to over apply that term, kickoff for being yourself out loud?
Sure. So your questions were a little bit different in terms of what I would go from. So my perspective, I'm going to talk to people about this from a social media standpoint first.
Mm.
However, from your listeners listening to this, literally you can talk about your personal brand from the standpoint of anything you're already doing, going to the local bar event, having lunches with people, happy hours, whatever it is. Like, that's where we need to start. You're just normally not bringing me in as like a more of a digital marketing person in Orlando to help you with the day-to-day stuff. So my conversation begins a little bit differently from how I would have anybody listening or watching this start for themselves.
So, but the idea being social media or whatever, social media is Web 2.0, but even with Web 1.0, you had exchange. People could put comments in blogs or whatever. There's been this sort of iteration of that. It sounds like what you're saying is we're doing the same work that we would otherwise be doing. I used to take opposing counsel out to lunch, and it always shocked these people. They're just like, yes. So, but it made the case better because we weren't fighting with each other because they knew I had kids, right? What you're saying, it sounds like, is basically do that kind of activity, but the internet allows you to scale it, allows you to do it with a lot more people so that your input yields a whole lot more of the positive output. So then step me back to that. What is the positive of not just showing up to court and making an argument, but actually engaging with people outside that context who might be in your work world? Why invite people to lunch? Why show up at baseball games? Why give talks to the Rotary Club?
Because the legal industry is very small, regardless of where you are, regardless of how large it is. And so it's connections for referral sources, it's connections for co-counsels, it's connections with the person who's going to be the judge on your largest case in 10 or 15 years. It is amazing to me the let's go Web 0.0 benefit that all of this can be if we start with that. And then obviously, the more we have this consistent and cohesive across all of our iterations, online, in person, digital, print, mailers, whatever, the more consistent all those things become, the easier it is for people to realize that we are genuinely who we purport to be.
I mean, socially, I want to talk about the negatives of that, but let's roll with the positive. I wrote in Lawyer Forward about social capital, about the idea of just sort of surrounding yourself with people who are personally invested in you succeeded one way or the other, right? I was listening to some research the other day that basically showed if you want to be friends with somebody, ask them for help or offer to help them. It's when there's something about serving each other that creates a deeper relationship. And so obviously these activities that you're talking about, being yourself out loud, allows you to do that sort of thing at scale. You can start connecting with each other. There are downsides to that, but let's talk about the positive. On the positive, my sense of you is that you share a lot about yourself as a husband and father, about your life. How do you think about that in your work? I mean, you're putting your kid out on the internet, you're putting your wife out on the internet, and it obviously changes the interaction to a degree because now you're adding a performative element to it. What are you seeing as the good of doing those kinds of things, and what do you see as maybe how it's gone too far? You've shared too much.
Sure. Um, Man, that's a good question. So there's a lot to unpack there. I I guess for me, the first part is I want to do this in a way where it doesn't feel like a performance. So the more that it is genuine and authentic and throughout our normal day, the better. Now, I will be totally honest. When I first started doing this, there were days where I was like, man, I just want to hang out in my house. But if I take my kid to SeaWorld, that would be better content. And like, it's a weird concept from that because obviously, like, he's going to have a lot more fun at SeaWorld. So hopefully it's a, win-win-win. But there were moments where things like that did come up, but I was able to do it in a way where it forced us to have more fun. It forced us to have that connection in an easier way versus, sitting on the couch watching TV or playing on his iPad or, something along those lines. In terms of going too far, people that recognize my kid without ever having met him through social media, and I mean, like, I'm wearing him on this shirt. I didn't intend to do that, but it goes sort of right. I didn't intend to
Have
whatever.
it
It goes right
aligned
into
so
your
well.
question.
Yeah.
Right. So there are situations like that, but ultimately, like, my standpoint is there is no true privacy anymore. Like, look at the amount of spam emails that you get that know like weirdly specific things about you
Mm,
when you didn't sign up for them and whatnot along those lines.
mm.
So I'm not terribly concerned in terms of like some random person kidnapping my kid. I used to be a prosecutor. Those things happen way more frequently from family members, estranged, some issue there, an aunt, a cousin, or whatever. So like, I don't know. It gave me a different view of the danger of society from
Well,
that
but
standpoint.
I mean, I think to your point, your initial point, you're going to start doing this activity through social media, and you're probably going to start. It sounds like to your advice, you're going to start doing it through not just your expertise, not just your profession. It's not just business. It's not just social content. It is just being yourself a bit, right? Making people feel more like it's easy, it's natural. Just start being out loud, right? I feel like when
Can I
you,
jump in for 1 second
yeah, yeah,
before you go on?
yeah.
So, like when you were talking about the lunch thing, all I'm suggesting you add, take a photo of the two of you at the restaurant when you're out
Uh-huh.
there, tag the person, and say something genuinely nice about them. Like, okay, it's really cool that in our area we have a case against each other, but we can still go out and be, colleagues. Or, so and so, this is my go-to person for, all of my personal injury cases. When I don't handle them, or they overlap with our family law stuff, this so and so who I'm taking out to lunch, does a great job for my clients. Things like that, because you're going to build the relationship in person, but you're also going to support it with some of that digital component in a way that is authentic and cohesive with what you're already doing. It's just that little bit extra that's going to go a lot farther.
But I'm trying to get like, what's your intention? What is the good you're trying to get out of that? Is that, do you feel like that makes that person more connected with, now that you've been publicly together, does that make that person feel more inclined to support you and your work? Have you found that just sort of builds your community, to use a word?
So there's that part of it. There's the reality. There's the potential to get them cases or get them work or make connections. Like, oh my god, I'll do something like that, and then somebody will post, oh, I don't have somebody to send my family law cases to. Like, can you connect me with Mike 10 years ago or whatever it is along those lines. There's also going to be that component of FOMO. So you get people like, oh my god, I haven't seen you in so long. Like, let's do lunch next week. Like, I want to hang out. I want to see that. Or, oh my God, I didn't know you two knew each other. Like, that's so crazy. How did you all initially connect? I know both of you very differently. There's all sorts of things that will come out from
Mm.
that connection, just, putting that moment out there.
Well, and to your point, again, you're scaling touches, right? Like for anybody to feel invested in you, I was listening to a podcast, Plain English. They were talking about the epidemic of loneliness, and one of the things that the research talked about is basically if you haven't made contact with somebody over a period of time, it's much harder to make contact again. And so you say, man, I haven't reached out to Bob in a year. I haven't talked to Bob in a year. It'd be really awkward for me just to well, now it's 2 years. Now you're definitely not going to contact Bob, right? So just creating those sort of social touch points. To the point of oversharing, somebody sent me a LinkedIn, man, freaking LinkedIn. Somebody sent me a post on LinkedIn where somebody said they were looking for a job, and they had just changed and added the open to a job thing, and he starts into it's been a rough couple of years. We've had a couple of miscarriages. We got divorced. We had to sell the house. My toe fell off. Like, just really going into this long post about all the stuff that was going. And then at the end, it was like, I like coding. You should hire me to code, whatever it was.
This
There
was a
are.
post or this was a direct message?
This was a post. This was like a
Okay.
public post. And,
And,
and
and for those of you that don't know Mike that well, Mike has this complaint about LinkedIn all the time.
all the time.
And there's just different posts that are specifically the ire of Mike's complaint.
It just makes me. And I guess this is what we talked about initially: is the difference between authenticity and sort of performative, manufactured appearance of authenticity. And something like LinkedIn is actually a really good example of a contrast that I want to draw with you. LinkedIn was an excellent place for specifically women and minorities to talk out loud about things in professional settings that they felt they could not speak out loud about actually at work. That as soon as they talked about it at work, because they're thinking about a lot of these large law firms, this might be the only, somebody who's a partner who is black, brown, a woman, might be the only one. And so for them to say something out loud about work conditions could be very isolating in that environment. But you go do it on LinkedIn, and now you have a lot of connections, a lot of people validating that, because just the nature of the numbers, just the nature of networks, you're going to get some validation. On that level, fantastic. I love the idea of being authentic online. You can find your people, you can connect with them. But once the marketing bros got a hold of it and figured out I could be authentic, in scare quotes, it started becoming a formula. I guess my question, as you advise lawyers about being on social media, is how you give them a formula without them becoming formulaic, right? How do you teach them to be themselves out loud, but without doing a plug and play performative fake version of them. So again, take me back to that starting point. How do you talk them through? I take your point about just take a picture when you're at the restaurant, but that's not all you're talking about, right? Like you're talking
Right.
about truly being yourself out loud, not just documenting your journey, but what are sometimes your deepest thoughts, your deepest fears. Is it platform dependent? If you're doing it on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, like what the place is it about the nature of your audience might change it? If you're mostly trying to attract other lawyers, is that different than if you're trying to attract potential clients? How do you think through the factors that would define how transparent you want to be?
So, can I answer your question that you had like 15 seconds ago and then
You
go
can
into this one?
always, yeah, anytime. You can
Sure.
make shit up
Because
as you go. Yeah.
you were talking about like how do you do this? How do you create a formula without being formulaic? So I do mind mapping. So I read whatever Designing Your Life by two professors
The
at
D school
Stanford.
guys, yeah.
Yeah, one of them designed the hinges for Apple, and they do this thing. And so, like, I have lawyers go through. We do this for an hour. You sit there and, all right, in 1 minute, give me like the 7 nouns that describe you the most. And so for me, like, I'm a lawyer, I'm a marketer, I'm a business owner, I'm a father, I play disc golf, I tell jokes, and like literally the things that will come up to you in that 30 to 60 seconds are your core things. And then let's take each of those, and now I'm going to give you, 2 minutes to break each of those into like three or five, adjectives or go deeper, whatever you want to call it. And then we do a third layer. And so from that, you've got like 150 points and you haven't given yourself enough time to put on the vice of fakeness to it. By doing this so quickly, you
Mm.
are forcing yourself into the honesty component of it. And then when you're coming up with topics, you ask yourself, like, does this touch the right points? Does this seem different from what's here? Does this go in? Because like I'm never going to tell you, to pour your heart out for no reason. But when there's a situation that comes up, as a business owner, as a father, as you see something that there's an issue, or that there's some terrible thing going on, or there's a real, touching story, now it's something that you can share that isn't just I read online to, pour my heart out and share my worst things here. It's something that is more, unique and actual to us.
But you're getting to a thing that drives me crazy. So we'll get to the. I have so much rage, Jordan. We'll get to the rage point. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I can summarize the point that you've made so far, it is that when you start with this work, when you start with creating a personal brand or a public platform or whatever the word is, you don't have to over strategize the first steps. The first steps might just be being present. It might just be compassionate attention. You're just there. So get comfortable with just being there, and then we can optimize for our outcomes later. Does that sound like a good summary of those first steps?
Absolutely. And it's things are going to naturally grow. Like I didn't Hawaiian shirt wasn't a day one thing, but laid back and approachable was a day one thing. And then that became like, all right, wearing a Hawaiian shirt became an extension of something that I had already been doing in just a more visible format. And so there'll be things like that for other people where like your brand will naturally evolve, but in a way that is authentic and genuine to who you truly are,
Mm.
instead of you being, instead of you trying to steal what's his name, like the Savannah Bananas guy. Like if you came out tomorrow in a bright yellow suit, it's like, oh, you're trying to be Jesse, as opposed to I don't know if that was day one, if they were bananas first, if they became the bananas, what I don't know the
Sure.
backstory to it, but
All right. So
it's a whole
you've
thing now.
to get to my rage point. So let's say you've done that work. You've found a place that you like to be. It's okay if it's just one, right? You don't have to be on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and whatever, Mastodon and all these other things that are popping up now that Elon's touched things and is breaking them. Whatever platform it is you like, just be present, be there for a while, get to feel the vibe of the space. You've done that work. Newsjacking is the thing that I want to rage about. Because the way this has been taught. So, for those of you at home, newsjacking is basically the idea that people want to hear your thoughts on things that are going on in the world. And sort of the extreme version of this is, I think this is particularly like triggers lawyers, whatever that mix of narcissism and insecurity is, that makes us feel like we're supposed to be the smartest kid in the room about everything. And so now every bloody news story we're supposed to show up and make some commentary on. That drives me nuts. I like I could say the conference that I went to, but you know which one I'm talking about, that they talked about newsjacking. And then after that, my Facebook feed was filled with a bunch of lawyers giving their commentary on every bloody thing that was happening that day in video. I'm just like, I don't care. This is stream of consciousness. How do you do that? Let's take it to the next step and say, I'm present, but now here's what I'm going to be present about. I don't have to post a response to bloody everything, but here's what I want to be known for. So, presence, now what do we want to talk about? How do you think through that?
So you go back to those core things, so like, look, Elon Musk, great example, because for me, I don't know enough about Elon to comment on that side of it. I don't know enough about Twitter to comment on like the goings on of the actual running. Like, I'm on Twitter and I tweet, but I don't know what the company's like. However, as these stories come out, I can go back and explain, like, from a business owner culture building perspective, this is the problem I have. Like, you fire all these people and then everybody gets locked out of the building because you fire all the people that run the badges for the building because, like, there was no thought process behind here. And now you're begging people to come back to work for you because they're truly essential in a situation where you've shown how little loyalty you have to them. Why should they have loyalty back to you? So small law firm owner of 4 to 6 employees, you need to be investing in your employees because you'll have this situation with a client's trust check that needs to be run over the bank at 4:59. You'll have this situation with the office flooding while you're at a conference somewhere else. Like, you'll have all these things that will come up, and that's a way where I can jump on the current event, but sharing my perspective on it in a way that I already know a ton about. It's just, this is an example. This is a story. This is a vehicle to say the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I heard Tiago Forte, who wrote Building a Second Brain, talking about we're now into the age of perspective, right? That it's our particular worldviews and heuristics and the angle we come at things from that is the most interesting thing. And so what you've just defined then is maybe step one is presence and step two is perspective. Ooh, I'm going to alliterate. Maybe step three is process. You see all the P's? That's how you know. Anyway, so you've
I
got
probably
presence.
process before I perspective because I want to know that I can distribute, and then I want to know that I'm distributing the right thing.
That's interesting. I might not agree with that.
Okay.
I might have to ponder that. And the reason I say that is because the thing that I've found is when you work out loud, it is in right. There's the old cliche, I write to know what I know, right? There's already stuff inside you. There's already perspective inside you. You know what I mean? You already have a worldview that you take for granted because you're coming from your own perspective. You devalue your own perspective as unique because it's not unique to you. You know what I mean? It's your everyday.
It's the punishment of knowledge, the curse of knowledge.
Right. But I think like presence generates perspective, right? In the sense that the more you're there, if you just do the work of just talking out loud and seeing something and go, oh, that's interesting, you start to find your triggers, the things that you may not even know. To your point about the Hawaiian shirt, you might not even know what your perspective is when you start this exercise. You might not have any idea what your worldview is, what your heuristics are, and it's in the presence that you start to generate that. So let's talk about formalizing it, right? What this next step is. And specifically, I want to talk about more formalized content. So things like podcasts, writing books, whatever. For me, anyway, the path was talk to people, humans in real life, right? Then start being on social media. Initially, it was Facebook for me because it wasn't a grandma hellscape back then. Sorry, my mom's on Facebook and she shares things that I just don't want shared with the world. Anyway, then I was present on social media and I just started talking out loud. And over time, that talking out loud became discussions, became debates, became ideas, became a book. And then Lawyer Forward, the book came out and the podcast, and now it's like a whole thing. Now perspective is my product, right? That is the thing that I offer to companies that hire me. So talk to me about formalizing a bit. You've done the work of being present. You've found some perspectives, some ideas, some thoughts that you have that you think might be unique. What's the next step in deciding, do I start a podcast? Do I write a book? Do I host a conference? Next step that for me.
The next step is going to be so unique to each person. I guess the next step for me that doesn't answer your question is, honesty with a silent P at the front, just to let you keep your
honesty,
honesty, right? But like, there's a part of this where it's like, look, I went to law school and I've handled 10,000 cases and I know what the hell I'm talking about for like this segment of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like, all right, I've been on this platform for this long and I've talked about this and I've got an audience and I know my thing about this. And then there's a part of it where it's like, look, I'm figuring this out right now too, and you're riding along with me as I get to it. And by being honest about those buckets, you can, I don't want to say you can say whatever you want, but you're going to be authentic through the whole process because you're letting people know where it's like, I want to try this out. I want to see how this goes. You're not, you know what shots you can call from knowledge, from experience, and which ones you just have a gut feeling are the right way. And I think the more specific that those things are, that's going to lead you to that next perspective. Like if you have some really crazy futuristic idea, then I think you're better off in some sort of longer form, whether that's the book, whether that's multiple hour podcast, whether that's a course, whether that's dropping this off. If you're just taking a different perspective on, if you're taking a different perspective on things that are shorter or more or quick changing, then I like a podcast a lot better. Then I like interviewing people. Then I like those things. And so it's a little bit different to tell you what to do with this.
Yeah, I think to add another P, because we're coming up with some stuff here, buddy. Okay. I think this is the platform moment, right? Like this is the moment where you start to say, okay, I've been present, I've been around other people's spaces, social media, whatever. I've been around essentially other people's houses. And I've sort of, through creating out loud, discovered my voice, my questions, right? You may not even have all the answers, and that's fine. Your perspective provides questions. So you've discovered a bunch of those questions. And now I think if this is a path you want to go, again, this is a business model question to your point. If this is a path you want to go where being yourself out loud is fundamental to your business, and again, I believe it's fundamental to being a lawyer, so I'm 100% behind it. But now there's a platform question. Where do you want to be able to do your deepest dives, to use David Baker's getting to know process? Where are you going to produce 3,000 words? Is it going to be on a blog? Is it going to be in a book? Is it going to be on a podcast? Whatever it is, find your platform to do that. To your point about that needs to be based on business model, one of the things I talked about in Lawyer Forward is there's a difference between a business that's built on audience and a business, including a law firm, and a business that's built on expertise. Dan Dresner's book, The Ideas Industry, talks about it as the difference between a public intellectual and a thought leader. A thought leader is trying to build audience. They have a fairly, like one sort of worldview. So I put myself in this. I do not consider myself a public intellectual or an expert. I consider myself somebody with a bunch of questions and a heuristic and a perspective, and it's really supply chainy and collaboration-y. And so I sort of see everything through that lens. That's what a thought leader is. A public intellectual is more, no, I'm in a basement. I'm reading books. I'm writing books. When I write, it's in an intellectual academic journal. It's just different. Thinking about the platform decision, where should I be creating now more formally, more frequently, more structured? How does your business model design impact that choice?
I mean, from a law firm owner perspective, I think I want to say all of our personal brands, but 99% of them are going to be focused on building the audience to monetize as clients, as referral sources, as expert witnesses, as collaboration on specific cases. So it's tough for me to give you the example where there's going to be a lawyer in this audience that's going to be separate from that, because ultimately you're making money by people hiring your firm, which is even if you have some like Stephen Lefkoff, I think, does a great job with this. He's got the Small Claims Academy helping people in Georgia through some of those things. Even on a situation like that, I still think he's going to make more money off people hiring his firm. I still think he's growing, his personal brand by speaking at all the car events and going through all that stuff in a great way. I still think the platform is going to be to get people to see you, to hire your firm, not to get them to believe you have a smart brain and buy your knowledge cut up in some manner.
Yeah, I think it's really to the original thing that we talked about. Is the purpose in this to make money? I think there is a valid exercise here, which might not ever directly tie to money. I think being a lawyer, being whether you're a public intellectual in the sense that you're an expert, you are writing to discover. You are writing and reading to find the patterns that people hire you to understand. They're insights that they couldn't have come because they're not paying attention for the extended period of time and writing about it the way you are. You've got to go find those patterns because that's your business model. I think if you're going to hold yourself out as an expert, you have to do this creating work. If you're the kind of lawyer that just wants to solve a set of you're good enough law, right? Like you're not pretending to be an expert. You're a tour guide through an unnecessarily complicated legal system. I think that's a fine business model. But now you're writing for a different purpose. You're writing for traffic. You're writing for visibility. You're writing for. My point is, in either case, money might be a side effect of social capital, that the kind of social capital that this work builds. It might not be the direct effect, and to me, that's okay. So let's say you're doing that. Let's say you're playing the board game of life, you're playing the board game of your business, and the resource cards that you're handed out, there might not be a ton of money. There's not a lot of revenue right now. It's entirely plausible this is going to be true for the next 3 to 5 years, right? So what do you do during that 3 to 5 years? If you're not doing this work of being yourself out loud for money, why do it, right? So what are the other goods? What are the other resource cards you can play on the board game during a recession that justifies doing this kind of work?
Sure. To have fun, to build connection, to build relationships with people that are, I don't even want to say of like mind, but are the tribe you want to be a part of. It's funny. I agree with you on the standpoint of the ability to do this at scale and attract a certain kind of person. You look at that as people gaming the system for raw numbers. I'm trying to tell people don't do that. Game the system for the right people who it thinks you're going to bond with, whether that's 100 people that follow you but are truly people you want to hang out with, or truly people you would let watch your kids in an emergency, or truly people you would donate a kidney to or ask for a kidney. Then great, you have built this really true relationship with a ton of people, or a handful of people, in a way that matters, that you feel connected to. You don't have to be shooting for 1 million followers who are like, oh yeah, the Hawaiian shirt wearing dude. Like, that doesn't have to be the goal of all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we talked about it for you develop expertise in the doing, you develop perspective in the doing, right? You actually make yourself a better lawyer to me, because what people are asking you for is the good that is created while you're doing this kind of work. So I mean, for me, this isn't side work. This isn't the side gig. Being whatever a creator means in the legal economy, I feel like is the job. There's going to be a time where creating these forms online, all the stuff that we bill for, all these billable hours, they could well be gone. And the only thing that's left is perspective. The only thing that's left is expertise and pattern recognition and audience connection. And these are the goods that come from the kinds of activities that you're encouraging. It may be the only thing that we got left. And at minimum, it's the unique thing. So I think people should definitely build on it. Well, we're going to part ways. But before we do, I wonder, do you have any tool recommendations for formalizing this? I'm asking this because I recently downloaded a couple of personal CRMs, because I think the act of a relationship manager for a firm, right? Like you might use what's the one? Lawmatics. You might use Lawmatics or whatever for a buyer's journey. That's very different than trying to create relationships over time. So I downloaded a couple of personal CRMs. One's called Dex, one's called Clay. I haven't made any conclusions on whether they're good or not yet, but you've got to maintain the social capital. So let's say we do all the work that you've recommended. We were ourselves out loud. We got people talking about us without us there. We have to keep moving that. We need reminders that tell us to reach out to people, connect with people. Do you have any tool recommendations or habit recommendations that we can build? He's holding up a cell phone, folks at home.
And like literally, all right, so you turn on Siri. Hey Siri, remind me to check in with Mike Whalen every 60 days. And then up comes the reminder in your phone to check in with, so and so. I mean, and then when it comes up, you can change it, you can tweak it, you can update your notes section. You can go through all of it. I mean, you can make this as complicated as you want. And honestly, like I run mine out of Lawmatics with my firm and with my marketing stuff for some of it. But otherwise, I've got so much of this stored in my phone. And then, before I go to lunch with people, you can make it as complicated as getting a form emailed to you with 100 questions that person's already answered and the ones you don't have, or you can just look at the notes for this person and have it remind you about, their spouse's name, their kids' ages, their interests, stuff like that. I mean,
Am I
you
in
don't.
your Lawmatics?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you came on the show,
There's
so
a mic in Lawmatics. Oh, that just makes me feel so good. Just let Matt Spiegel know that I am the cog that is making this whole Lawmatics machine work, and I expect my cut on a Tuesday. Well, I appreciate you talking to us about this. Again, I am very bullish on whatever you call this exercise. Whether you call it personal branding or thought leadership or whatever. I feel like presence. For lawyers to do our jobs well, we need to be present, we need to have perspective, and we need to just be creating, just be talking out loud, and it yields all kinds of benefits, all the benefits that come from social capital. So I appreciate you bringing it to us. For people who want to learn more about what you do, Jordan, what's the best way to connect with you?
if you search on LinkedIn, you can find my profile where I pour my heart out every day about all the worst things that have happened to me, and then ask you to hire me for coding
Now I feel
services.
like you're punking me. Now you're just messing with me.
Yeah, that's the last P.
Yeah.
Punk Mike.
that's exactly I can't do sarcasm to start with the P. It's the silent P at the beginning of sarcasm again. Well, I appreciate it. We'll make sure to have links on whatever the show notes are going to be. For those of you watching or listening, I am rekindling Lawyer Forward. As you can tell, we're reissuing new episodes. We're interviewing people like Jordan on Fridays in the Facebook group. If you want to talk about your experience as a solo or small firm lawyer, or a lawyer in general, you're just trying to find your place, definitely reach out to me, Mike at Lawyer Forward. And then also, we're going to relaunch the newsletter, the Lawyer Forward letter, over on lawyerforward.com. So go and sign up for that. I'm just curating a lot of wisdom from all the places I'm reading it and bringing it to you guys so you can use it in your practices. We're also, side note relevant to this, I am going to put a cohort writing class together called Be Yourself Loudly. It will happen within the next year. If you want to learn how to get personality back into your writing as a lawyer, reach out to me. You'll be the thing that pushes me to actually do it. So anyway,
Or get personnel in your writing to begin with.
or to begin with. I don't want to be mean. Some of you were told when you were little kids that you're a great arguer. You should be a lawyer. They didn't mean that as a compliment, okay? They didn't know how to tell you you're kind of a rough personality that doesn't get along with people. But we will fix that. Through your writing, we will fix that. Jordan, thank you for joining us. Everybody live, thank you for being here. For those of you listening to the podcast, make sure that you leave all the nice notes so we can get this thing moving again. I appreciate you all. Have a great day, sir.
Thank you so much for having me.